Hi there, I'm Trish from TrishNewbery.com and welcome to the sew along for the messenger bag. So a messenger bag is basically just a cross body bag with a flap over the front. So this one's reasonably large. It measures 13 inches by 17 inches finished, around about. So that's 33 centimetres by 43 centimetres. I've put the fabric requirements on the listing, but what you're going to need is you're going to need an outside fabric. You're going to need an inside fabric, and it's going to be a good idea if you put some fusible interfacing on the inside. So the fuse you choose depends on how thick or dense you want this bag to be. It's a really good idea if you like a really dense spongy bag to use that thick foamy fuse. You could however just use regular fuse that suits your fabric type. So you're going to need some reasonably bulky fabric, so anything like a craft cotton, duck, canvas would be great. So we don't get confused, what I'm doing is I am going to sew the outside of my bag in this black, it's a waterproof canvas, so it's reasonably heavy. I'm sewing my inside, now this is a linen look polyester, and this is in the brown, I'm going to call it brown, and then my fuse that I've already put on is the grey side, so hopefully that will help you out if you get stuck through this. It's a really easy, straightforward beginner's level sew, so you shouldn't have any problems with that. So I'm going to just use a plain sewing stitch for this entire sew. You can use your overlocker for the inside pocket. So there is a little inside pocket we're going to sew, and you can tuck your cell phone into it or pens or whatever you want to, so we'll work our way through that. So what you need to do is assemble your pattern, cut out your pattern pieces, apply your fuse, and we're ready to go. So if you need help assembling the pattern, there is a video on how to assemble the pattern on my website. I've also got a link to it below in the description. So let's just get straight into it and get started by sewing the inside pocket. If you don't want the inside pocket, just jump over the section to the next one. Here is my pocket piece like this. So it's a rectangle, and on one of the long edges, just down from the top, you'll see a notch. So that notch is marked at 2 centimetres, 3/4 of an inch. So what we're going to do now, if you want to use a zigzag or an overlocker, we're going to tidy this edge up that's closest to the notch. If you don't want to, all you need to do is go to your iron and press that under around about 5mm, 1/4 of an inch, and then press again at that notch position. So I'm going to go and just use my overlocker to edge tidy that edge. I'm not cutting any fabric off, I'm just going to use it to get rid of the stray threads, and then I'll press under like so. So this is what we're looking at here. So what we're going to do now is just sew a straight line through that overlocking line from one side to the other. So here you can see I've pressed this into place, so you might have a second line of pressing here. And all I'm going to do is stitch this down through that overlocking line, so right on top of it. I like to do mine from the front, you can do yours from the back. And there's no need to back tack, just sew from one side to the other. Okay, so our next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to our iron and press under those remaining 3 edges by 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. Right, so here you can see we have our 3 raw edges all tucked under with our iron. So now, if you want compartments on this pocket, on the inner pocket, if you don't, just skip the step. But if you do, I've marked them on the pattern piece, but all you need to do is fold this in half. I mean, you can do this before you press, and mark that centre line, because we'll be sewing a line straight through there. And there's also a line on this side of it which is 3 centimetres away, which I'll have to check that measurement, I'll pop that behind, and that's so we can put our cell phone on this side and maybe a pen on this side, in the middle, and then have another little area, I don't know, for cards or loyalty cards or whatever coins. So make sure you mark that in, because it's easier to do now than later. You could, I'm putting mine in with chalk, you could put yours in with pins or mark it out here. Losing my words today. However you need to. The main thing is just to make sure that they're straight lines. Easier to follow when we stitch. Alright, so let's attach this pocket to the inside of our bag. So I'm working on the inside of the bag, and this is the bigger piece. So you're looking for your lining fabric that's bigger, and at one end you'll have 4 drill holes marked on it. So they're placement for our pocket. So I'm just going to mark these with a white pin head to make it easier to see on the video. Okay. And to give you an idea where the pocket is, it's at the bottom. So the pocket's on the bottom side. So take your lining and make sure it's right side up. Take the pocket that we've just prepared and put it right side up on top of it. So we have wrong side of the pocket to right side of this piece here. Now you're going to need some pins just to help put this in the right position. So our drill holes are marked at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. So what that means is we find a pin, we take a pin and we estimate a place 1 centimetre in, 3/8 of an inch in from each corner, and pop our pin through like that. And then where that pin comes through, mark that to the drill hole. So the tip of that pin goes through, and that shows us the position for the pocket. So we need to do that for each of the 4 corners. So sometimes what can happen is that your marks can move as you cut your fabric out. It doesn't really matter if they're not perfect. So you just need to try and get them into as near enough a position as possible, and then work on flattening it out, for want of a better word. So all we're looking for is we want those drill holes covered. So once you've got those 4 pins into place, start adjusting this to suit. What we're looking for is we want the bottom of the pocket, and the top, parallel to the bottom. And we also want it parallel to the side seams. So you just keep moving this pocket around until it sits flat, because fabric always moves when you cut it out. So just keep fiddling with it until you're happy with it and it covers those drill marks. Alright, so now what we're going to do, making sure we leave this top edge free because that's the opening, we're going to edge stitch around the 3 sides. So edge stitch literally means just in from the edge, so we're looking at maybe 2 millimeters, so maybe 1/8 of an inch, and don't forget to back tack at the beginning and end. So we're just going to go forward 3 and back 3. So there we are, we have that, it's nice and flat. So now we're going to sew the centre down. Just follow your line down from top to bottom and make sure it's nice and straight, and make sure you reinforce it well at the top. And then stitch the line next to it. Now we're going to work on sewing the sides of the bag together. So take the smaller of the lining pieces, and you'll notice at the edge that's got the curves on it, there's notches. So these are helping us join the side together just to make it look really good. So it's important that they match. So what are we going to do? We're going to take the side bag piece that you've fused and place that right sides together. So So I've marked those pins into place just to show you. So you want the top here to match, and as you come down you want the notch here on the side to match that notch there on the piece. So we want those positions to match. So we're going to sew this with a 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And now all we're going to do is just to curve this round and keep stitching until we meet the next notch position here. And now we're going to continue stitching in a straight line till we meet the same notch on the other side. And now continue stitching. So that's what you should have in the corners, like that. Alright, so now we're going to sew on the other side of the lining to it. So just turn that around like this, and take the lining piece that we sewed the pocket to. So here it is here. So just above the pocket on the side you'll see a notch on either end. So those notches need to match to this top position here. So what we're going to do is, it's probably easier if you put this pocket piece down like this. I'll just trim that off while I'm on the job. And then take the piece you've just sewn and turn it so it's right sides together. And we want that raw edge there to match to that notch position there. So what this means is, if that's in the correct place, as you come down, remember those notches we matched earlier? They should match down here as well. So I'll just go and pin that into place, and we're just going to sew that together in a 1 centimetre 3/8 of an inch seam as well. So now we're going to do exactly the same thing, but for the outer, the main part of the fabric. I won't talk you through this. I'll sew it and just fast forward the video. And of course we don't need to do the pocket. If you're sewing a different colour, don't forget to change your thread. So turn this so it is right side out and push those corners out. I'm going to call them corners even though they're curves. So now if you want to, what you can do is do some stitching detail. So you could push this out to the edge like this, and then just stitch in from the edge. I'll do that just on the front side. So I'm coming to the front side, I'm going to push that seam all the way out. Now you can iron that if you find it easier. I don't like to iron it until after I've finished. You want to push all that seam out, and then you could change thread colours if you want to. I'm going to stitch now. I'm going to say it's like 3 mil, so maybe 1/8 of an inch in from the edge. You could do 6 mil, you could do 5 mil. That sort of just gives it a nice little pushed out look. So you could do that to the back one as well if you wanted to. I'm not going to. I'm just going to jump ahead and work on the straps. So I have 2 strap pieces. I've only fused one of them. If you want them extra thick, you could fuse both of them. Generally the side that fused is seen as the right side, but your call on that one. So we're going to place those right sides together, and we're going to sew a 1 centimetre seam down both sides, 3/8 of an inch. Now turn your strap through so that it is wrong sides together. Okay, so once that's pushed through, we're just going to top stitch. So make sure that edge is pushed out right to the very edge, and I'm going to top stitch. It's 5 mil, 1/4 of an inch away from the edge, and I'm going to do that on both sides. You might find it easier to press this first. Okay, so go to your iron and press that and tidy up anything that needs tidying up. And now we're going to put it all together. Okay, so we want the outside of our bag inside out. So we want that wrong side out. And then we want to take our lining and have it right side out. And what we're going to do now is take our lining and pop it inside so that we match everything together. So just match it together like this. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is get our straps sorted out. Now the straps are going to sit in this position here. Now when we sew these together, we need to leave an area for turning, and you could leave it up here or you could leave it at the centre front. But what I'm going to do, and I know this is really not a good idea, is I'm going to come to the lining, and around about 3 or 4 inches down, I'm going to break open the lining here with my unpick, and I'm going to turn it through there because I can stitch this together then through the centre of the bag and hide all the ugly bits. So I suppose I should have told you to do that earlier, but sometimes it's just easy not to. You don't have to do that here, you don't have to leave the turning here. You could certainly leave it somewhere else, but as long as it's far enough down, what I'm going to do is just unpick enough. And by enough, I'm looking at maybe 10 centimetres, 3 or 4 inches. And we'll just stitch that together afterwards. So just use your unpick. I call it a quick unpick. Some people call it a quick pick. So we just want to do that. We'll stitch that together afterwards, but just make sure it'll be big enough. We can always open it later. It just keeps the top of the bag looking a bit more professional if you have an internal. And of course when you're sewing it, you can certainly leave a gap there as you're sewing it, but sometimes with newbies it can be a bit confusing there. So what I'm going to do now is take my strap and come to one end and pop this inside the bag, and we want one end of the strap to sit like this here, right in the middle, and we want the other end of the strap, and we don't want it turned at all, twisted I mean, to be the same position here. And we'll reinforce this later. So be careful when you sew not to sew in the rest of that. So what are we going to do now? We're going to make sure that the lining layer is lined up with the bag all nicely. By nicely I mean the seams. And we're going to stitch this together at 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. Now when you get to that strap position, it's a good idea to go over it a couple of times, or you could just sew it once and go back and re-stitch it later on. So there we are there. Going to make sure that that strap's in the right position. I mean, if you struggle with these straps, you could always just run a tack stitch down like that, just to hold it in place so you don't need pins. So you want the strap like that, then the lining, and continue sewing. I'm just going to go back to that strap area and just run a couple of rows of stitching on top of my first stitching at both sides, just to make extra specially sure those straps are secure. And then I'm going to go and turn the bag through. Now if you wanted to, you could put clips in the corners. Really depends on what type of fabric you're using. Right, so this should be starting to resemble a bag by about now. And you see how this is sort of a bit messy in the corner? That's because I didn't clip the corners, so I'm going to go back in now and just cut little notches out of those corners and turn it through again. Yes, that's much nicer like that. So I'll do the same on the other side. So now I'm going to run some top stitching detail around that edge, and I'm just going to start at one of the strap sides, just making sure that strap is out of the way. I'll start here just under the strap, and I'm going to run a top stitch 5mm, around about 1/4 of an inch, pushing that seam all the way out to the edge, just to make sure the lining stays to the inside, and it gives a nice detail. You could also run this in a contrasting colour if you liked. It'll give extra reinforcing to the top of the bag and to the strap. So now that all remains is to stitch together our turning point, so I'm just going to change my thread colour back to match. So to close off the seam, what I'm going to do is just push that to the inside. I mean, you could press this in by 1 centimetre, it will do exactly the same thing. So we're just going to match that 1 centimetre line, and I'm just going to edge stitch that opening closed. Just make sure you're only sewing through the lining part and not through the outside bag. So go ahead and do some quality control work. So just snip any stray threads out of the way and turn your bag right side out, and you are finished. So thanks for joining me. If you like what you see, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button. I've got lots of free and paid patterns on my website, so just follow the link below. And I'd love to see your makes on my Facebook group, and the link's below for that as well. So yeah, thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you again soon for another sew along video.